I was painfully aware that we were not going to get a welcome.
Welcome to the podcast. My name is Brando, episode number 500. That sounds so strange, Mr. Alan Niven, who's taken a part of a few of those hours of the 500 episodes, not including today yet. How are you, sir?
Well, first of all, congratulations on 500 episodes. That's a lot of work, and it also shows that people want to come and hear your casts.
Thank you. Yes, it has been a lot of work. I will always credit my dear friend Ian, still current friend, former co-host, for coming up with what I thought was a stupid idea. Like, who wants to talk about Guns N' Roses? Like, I mean, they're my favorite band, but what am I gonna say? November Rain is my favorite song. Talk about that for an hour, and here I am, basically the length of the reunion, the three reunions, so 8 years. It's getting to 500 episodes, getting to interview you a few times, all sorts of from Alice Cooper to my heroes from the Doors. I mean, the fact that I've had John Densmore and Robbie Krieger on here will mean so much. I mean, there's Pauly Shore, Richard Fortus, who recently became, I don't know if aware of the podcast, even though he's been a guest. Because sometimes you never know, Alan. You do an interview and then you just don't know who it's with. You forget you're in a sort of like promotional mode. So I don't know. I don't expect to be friends with people. But even he at the time said over 400 episodes. How is that possible? It's possible because of getting yeses from people like you, Alan, and grateful all over the world. Because Guns N' Roses, their music, it's one thing to be heard all over the world. People singing from other languages singing their songs. It's another to be listening to some guy from New York talking about it from all over the world. So just thanks for being here. And I say that to both you, Alan, and everybody listening and watching. So just thank you for 500 and maybe 500 more. We'll see.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So, what do you want to talk about first?
And so, what do you want to talk about for the wrestling fans? Little Cody Rhodes, I guess, right there. So, within those 500 episodes, I've became friendly-ish. I say I don't expect to be friends, but you become friendly-ish with people. Alan, I've been so grateful you've been one of those, mainly through email, phone conversations. We met once in Arizona where I threw up in front of you. I apologize. Can you? How well do you remember that? Did you?
Of
Can you
course, I remember that. I felt bad for you.
we've
Um,
never. No,
let,
tell your
let,
side of the story, please, for those who haven't heard it.
let's get something clear. You didn't throw up in front of me. I was sitting in the delicatessen, and you were outside in the parking lot. And I turned around and I said, "There he is." And the wife looked at me and he said, "Oh God, he probably came down the wrong road. He's throwing up." Because that road into Prescott from the south is 12 miles of switchbacks, and it's enough to make anybody throw up when you get there. But hopefully you weren't throwing up because you were in Prescott, because Prescott's a nice place.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was exactly that. And Dramamine has become my friend. It was, I don't know. I mean, you're probably used to, I mean, you have memories of rock stars throwing up around you for partying too hard. And there's me, oh, I got a bellyache. But yeah, it was a crazy road. So I've been lucky to be friendly with you. And yes, I will.
Kendall, Kendall used to throw up
Oh,
for a gig.
oh, Mark Kendall, yeah.
Yeah, he'd quite often he'd be in the corner of the dressing room throwing up the six pack he had just put down.
Okay. I get a jittery stomach. Again, that could be just a stereotype, but I'll get like an anxiety stomach and just, well, we won't TMI. I'll revert the direction back to the task at hand. So part of these episodes and friendships that I've made throughout, one of them, and I'm sorry, Alan, was Doug Goldstein. I don't want to put a label on it like that. I haven't spoken to him in a while. There was a period of time where, I know you guys don't see eye to eye. That's to say the least. We'll get into that. But I'm like, both of you are really nice to me. Out of the blue one day, after I had interviewed him a few times, he wanted to work on a book. I was amazed. I've had, some writing experience. I've talked about this. I don't want to get too much into it because I have spoken about this. It didn't work out. I really blame because it's funny. Richard is reverts back to Richard Fortis and how what a really nice guy he was. He sent me kind of words of support because he listened to episodes where I talk about how the book didn't work out, and he said it's not you. I can tell. You are a smart guy. You were kind of you kind of blamed it on the marketing place. Somebody who wanted a quick turnaround. That guy even said like, we got to do this quicker if we want to get it in by quarter 4 or whatever. And I'm like, we're not working like that. So he just wanted at the time I was really down on myself. But since then, again, it hasn't worked out with Doug. It's kind of I feel kind of like almost like an ex kind of thing. Like it didn't work out. Like sometimes with a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever, it just didn't work out. That's how I feel. I don't know. I'm like maybe Axel in that way, where I'm like, you know what? Leave it in the past. I've kind of moved on. I remember that conversation with you at that lunch where my wife, I was trying to prepare you that I was working on Doug's book because I knew of the relationship or lack thereof. She just blurted it out. You were obviously not a. Do you remember what you said to me? There was a few things you said to me. You said, well, that's what did you say to me? I don't want to take
Oh,
up
I
too much of
don't
this
remember.
setup.
That was ages ago. I don't remember.
Well,
I
you
think
tried to warn me. 'Cause
I
I have,
think
I
I
have.
I think I might have tried to give you a heads up, and hopefully I did it in such a way that it wasn't what I probably should have said. But no, I tried to give you a heads up.
You did, and forgive me for giving such a preface to this conversation, but it needs it. You were actually super professional, which you always are when you want to be, like we all do. And I remember even calling you, or we spoke the day after it didn't happen. Like I just the whole book fell apart. You said sleep on it. Don't do an episode right now. Let everything digest. You said I'm sure it's for the best. All of these things. You really didn't push your feelings onto my feelings, and I really appreciated that. But we're here to talk about your feelings, and since the book, it's been a couple years since it hasn't worked out. And the reason why I'm still talking about it here is that have been stories that have been living in my head that I've been sharing on the podcast, that I've been sharing with fans, that I don't know if they're true or not. Um, so it's like, am I sharing misinformation? I don't know. There have been people who have gathered your stories and Doug's stories. The person who I used to like, Mick Wall, who you were unfortunately part of that situation where I don't. Do you remember that quick little interaction? By the way, on Twitter and email, where he called me an idiot because I said Axel wanted. This is one of the stories that that Doug told me that Axel agreed to fight Vince and said only if we could fight to the death, and it has to be in a country that allows that. And that was sent out to Vince, and he never responded. So I put that out on Twitter. Mick Wall was not tagged. And at the time, I think I was mistaken. I thought you had said that to me, but I looked in my drafts, and it was Doug. Maybe you told me. I don't know if that story is true, so you can tell me now. Because even in private email, I'm like, Mick, we've spoken. We had a great interview. What? Why are you calling me an idiot? Like I'm some guy telling you to get in the ring 30 years later. So that's a jumping off point. Is that story? Do you know anything about that story, Axel and Vince? How it either fizzled out or how it culminated or anything?
Oh, it just fizzled out. I mean, they yapped at each other through various things like MTV and so on and so forth, and tame journalists. But um, it just fizzled out. The I remember the actual incident well because I was walking off stage with Izzy after they'd just done something with Tom Petty, performed Tom Petty, and Vince come. Bathed in stage light, and we're coming into the darkness, and out of the darkness comes Vince and hits Izzy, and Vince is not a prize fighter. And the biggest effect he got was Izzy being a bit taken aback and startled. Whereas I have to confess, at that moment, I got a hold of Vince, put him on his back on the ground, put my knee into his chest, and raised my right arm, ready to thump him. And Lord, if I can remember the drummer's name in Petty's band.
Mm.
Lovely guy, but I can't remember his name at the moment. But he grabbed me and pulled me off and said, you don't want to do that. And he was right. I mean, can you imagine me smashing Vince's plastic nose?
That
I
would have
mean,
made
that wouldn't,
for some headlines in the day
yeah,
of
his
headlines. That might have
rhinoplasty.
taken the cake, you know.
And Vince scuttled off, and then Axel turned up and heard what had happened, and he and I together went looking for Motley. And when we got to the back of the building, we were in time just to see Motley running away in their limousine. But Axel and I at that point were intent on discussing the matter further with them.
So
But
these are things that
and it just fizzled out. It was just stupidity. Um, Now, if you want to talk about something, let's talk about how Guns N' Roses fell apart and who was responsible and why and what happened and when.
okay, we can jump ahead and I want to, and I'll shut up because we're here for you, even though it's the 500th episode. This isn't about me. This is about everybody, and then just the fun stories we've been able to get here, uh, amazingly through the podcast from people like you. Is that you, yeah, I'm sure you don't remember, but it sticks with me when I told you that the book was ending. You said good because I like you and I didn't want to have to sue you.
Yeah.
So these are why I'm bringing up these stories. So with the end, because Doug's thing, and I looked it up right before we started recording, your name was mentioned almost 300 times. Not all negative, but a lot of it was almost 300 times, and you're not the whole book. I mean, there was just a lot towards the because he came in at the beginning almost. You were there, but obviously he wasn't. But towards the end, I guess we need to get into your firing. So here's
Well,
this.
hold on a minute. Let's get something straight here.
Okay.
Doug Goldstein was employed to be a tour manager.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He was not there for the pre-production of Appetite. He had nothing to do with Live Like a Suicide being put out. He was employed to be tour manager, and then I brought him into the company because I thought that was the best way to maintain some loyalty and oversight. Because there's an old saying, he who is on the bus wins. There's a long history of tour managers who fuck over managers because they're on the tour bus all the time. So they're sowing little seeds in
Mm.
their own interest. And I thought, if I bring him into Stravinsky, there's a chance there I'll be able to get some loyalty and keep him in place and keep some continuity. He replaced, oh, again, I'm having trouble remembering his name, but it was a British guy that I had originally for the band doing tour managing, who was also a good sound man. Colin, what was his
Mm.
last name? Anyway, Colin. Um, and, and Colin screwed up, so I had to find somebody fast. And I was recommended Doug by Richard Feldstein, who was my accountant, Great White's accountant, and eventually GNR's accountant, once I got them away from the accounting firm they were with. And the reason I got them away from that accounting firm was the guy who ran it called me up and offered me a ridiculous price on a Bronco that was owned by one of his clients called Paula Abdul.
Okay.
And my read of that offer was, he's trying to compromise me. And if you're trying to compromise me, you're not somebody I want involved for one of my bands. So they got moved out of Boulevard.
By the way, just so I can fill in things, I wish I had a producer, but I got to be my own producer. It was the drummer first, to go back a little bit, Tom Petty, Steve Ferrone?
No,
No? Okay. Well, that's why I need a producer. I'm a failure there. But you are right. It's going through my notes here. Colin, who he thought it was Australian, so I don't know. And I guess he did, that he was doing more coke than the band members. That was, according
well,
to Doug.
that's what Izzy and Slash told me. And they threw him off the bus. And I happened to be in Seattle when that happened because I had a band playing in Seattle that night. And I had to get on a plane and fly down to LA, catch a flight, get down to Texas, down to Houston as fast as possible, and you know, make sure that the ship didn't ground somewhere. And this is on the Cult Tour. But anyway,
Well,
Goldstein was the tour manager. He had nothing to do with forming the marketing strategy that I employed to get the band broken.
right.
He was the tour manager. He makes some rather extravagant claims of his significance. And the one thing I will say was, yeah, you were significant as the tour manager. You did a good job as a tour manager, and I could rely on the bus getting to the next gig, knowing he was on it. All right.
Here's
But
mhm,
but in terms of dealing with the label, he never dealt with the label.
no.
He had no creative input. For example, the first three or four Guns videos were all my conceptualizations. It was
These
my
are all things he gives you credit for, by the way.
yeah,
Everything, like, he's in
yeah,
lockstep with you here.
yeah, yeah. It was my strategy to go through England and break the band through England. I was painfully aware that we were not going to get a welcome from AOR radio. So I knew that the only way that I could break this band would be by touring and getting to the English press fast. And getting to the English press before the likes of Faster Pussycat, what other bands were around at that time?
What in
Anyway,
the early
huh?
what in the early '80s on that Sunset Strip? Because I know you guys
Yeah,
toured with Faster Pussycat. That was that
we
first,
we actually took them to England and Germany with us.
and
But
that
there
was
were
Doug's first show. That was Doug's first, like, for that famous story where the drummer of Faster
yeah,
Pussycat was tied up and put in the lobby. So everything is
they
is
didn't put them in the lobby. They put them out in
in
the
the
snow.
elevator, right?
No, they took them outside and dropped them in the snow. I mean,
Okay.
it was so freaking mean of them. But anyways, so Doug is a tour manager. That's what he's good at. And let's get something else straight, because this is not an opinion. It's a matter of history that we can all look at. And because it's history, it's incontrovertible. And the fact of the matter is that once he and Michel Anthony pulled their coup, what do we get out of Guns N' Roses? We get the spaghetti incident, an Axl solo record, masquerading under a GNR logo. And, you know, that to me was the biggest sin of the record. No, not quite the biggest sin of the record. The biggest sin of the record was that it was boring, that Chinese Democracy was a boring record. But calling it Guns N' Roses was not honest. It was totally a solo record, and that's all has been since 1991. So you have to look at it and go, well, Doug, well, Michelle, that worked out really well, didn't it? All those years were lost, all those creative years that could have been, who knows what that band could have done had it stayed together, had it kept its chemical dynamic, and by that I mean personality, not what goes up, Izzy and Slash's nose, had the chemistry of the band stayed, who knows what they would have written in those 10, 20, 30 years. So, genius of
I,
Doug Goldstein is you created the situation where that band fell apart and we lost the prime of the band. And we can thank Michelle Anthony for that too, the
um,
band's lawyer.
yes, she
Did
was.
he, did he tell you about his affair with her?
No, I really didn't get, other than his marriages, we didn't get too much into his extra curriculars. So I can't speak to that. But what I can speak
He's,
to is that I understand you have an opinion that is shared by definitely a section of fans, because it's been a longer time since Chinese democracy, the wait from spaghetti incident to Chinese, than Chinese to now. And the output, yes, since Izzy left, since Steven left, these are things that,
well,
whether it
you've
should,
got it. They've got it in a nutshell. I mean, it's wonderful that bands manage to have long careers. And I could be accused of going, well, you see it that way because that's what it was when you were there. But for me, the first crack in GNR was losing Stevie because nobody played with his feel. Stevie, to this day, Axel has not employed a drummer who can swing. They're all thumpers.
we
Okay.
need to.
Stevie could swing. Now, is Stevie the best technical drummer in the world? Not even close. He's
You don't
not
need
a
to be.
great he's not a great technical drummer, but he had such a spirited enthusiasm for being in the band that informed his feel and he could swing. So losing Stevie was the first crack. Losing Izzy, you've lost the band because Izzy was the main writer with the absolutely unimpeachable rock and roll feel and rock and roll consciousness. He was the best writer. Okay. Losing Izzy was Doug's first, well, not his first, but his major, major, major mistake. That was stupid.
So I guess let's get into that, because it's a whole other discussion, losing Izzy and Steven and the sound of the band. And I mean, this happens to other bands and carrying on, but the people at play here, which is you and Doug. And we, Doug offered, I know you said no at the time when I was talking to Doug. So I guess I got to represent just a little bit here. People are like, oh, you should get, since you talked about Alan and Doug, you should get them on the same episode. I think I tried once. Alan said, no, I'm not going to push it. So I got to represent just.
I'm not ever going to appear in any forum with Douglas Goldstein. There is no equivalence. He is a treacherous little tour manager. He is not a producer. He is not a manager. Um,
Before
Faye,
I,
Faye,
I
Faye, who did the um, shows in Denver, apparently famously said that he was an overpaid security guard.
there's a, because while I enjoy your way with words, there's a few things I want to just say for him, and then you can react. Because yes, was hired as a tour manager, and he really explicitly said to me that we had a great division of labor. He did his thing, I did my thing. It worked. That
He
it got.
didn't do, there was no division of labor. He was my fucking employee. That is not a division of labor. That is him painting himself in the best possible light that he can. He was my employee.
Well, this sets up something else, because he said that you were at the risk of losing. of Axel firing you, and there's a specific incident
Permanently.
of Axel fire. No, no, no. It was before this. That
Permanently. Axel was always threatening to fire people or quit. I mean,
and
he had me banned from the Aerosmith tour for 3 weeks at the beginning of it because I refused to cancel the tour. The problem was, Axel, I didn't sign a contract just for you and your whim. I signed a contract with 5 individuals collectively known as Guns N' Roses, and I have a responsibility to 5 people, not just one. The other 4 wanted to go on tour. As it was, I chose a very strange way to, off the wall way, to get out of that conundrum when he called me and said, cancel the tour, because I've got Izzy in the room who said, Niv, we got to go, and everybody else wants to go and do the tour, but Axel says, cancel it. So I picked up a pair of dice and threw them. Do you know that story?
no, what
Goldstein was in the room. He didn't bother to tell you that story.
no, I will say there was so much that we didn't even get to. That was part of the frustration of the book is that I was given these deadlines where I wasn't getting. I got a lot of stories. I know I didn't get everything, but his thing was that he basically saved your job. This is his word. This is his thinking. That he was saving your job consistently for like almost 2.5 years.
Do you
Axel
know
must
what
have.
Tom Zutaut told me?
What's that? And Tom. Oh, well, I know what Tom said because he wants to charge me $5,000 for an interview. This
Oh,
is
good
free.
God. You're kidding me.
That's what he told a friend of mine. I said, "Can you reach out?"
Oh, my God.
So,
Oh, my
no,
God.
I
All
don't
right.
pay for interviews, let alone 5K. But anyway,
So,
continue.
so it's Axel's birthday. And I actually go around to his apartment that morning and I take him a really nice white Ovation guitar as a birthday present. And then I had a dinner for him at Le Dome, the dump, as we used to call it. Um, Axel, Tom, and Doug and Tom went up to Axel's apartment to pick him up and bring him down to the dinner. And everybody else was there. We were all there, we were all seated at the table, and I was seated at the end of the table, and I felt a hand go on my shoulder. And then Tom's head was right here, and he whispered in my ear, Doug Goldstein is not your friend, which was the first time I had a third party tell me that he is putting poison in Axel's ear all the time. In Slash's own book, he said, it was obvious to him that Goldstein wanted to snatch the brass ring. He was a treacherous individual.
So,
He,
Doug, I was going to have this conversation with him if we got to it that he needed to soften his stance on Slash, even though Slash had said some poor things about him in his book because Slash is so beloved. But he was like, Slash and I did so much of the business together. We would be in the same hotel room working on the business together. So I don't know where
bullshit.
he believes that that Slash and Duff their minds, their history has changed because of, unfortunately, of what you have said. So Doug wants to clear his name. So again, I'm trying to tell a story. Uh,
Bullshit. The one
okay.
person, first of all, he was the tour manager, okay? An employee. Secondly, in terms of relying on a band member to quote unquote talk about the business and do the business, the one person I could rely on consistently was Izzy. Duff was a drunk and not connected to the business side. Slash was being Slash, and especially when he was younger, he really was Slash. You can imagine the shit he got up to. Stevie had nothing to contribute in terms of business. And Axel was usually locked away in one of his homes, pissing and moaning about something. The one person I could rely on to talk to was Izzy.
Okay. He didn't have he said there wasn't much about Izzy that you and Izzy that you were the pair that from day one Izzy thought he looked like a cop and never really trusted him. That's
He did
what.
look like a cop. His father was a cop. His
Yes, he
father was a
was.
motorbike cop.
Yes.
I met
Well,
him and he gave me the creeps.
well, here's actually a
I'm
poignant.
not good with authority figures, especially cops.
Well, here's a good thing to bring up based to jump off that point. Obviously, uh, and we'll talk about your book later, but in the theoretical uh, Doug book, of course, like with any autobiography, you talk about your childhood, and I wanted to focus a lot on that because everyone does the drug, sex, and rock and roll stuff. So building a good foundation of who you are. So part of the foundation of who he was came down to he saw the relationship between his father and his brother in you and Axel. That he saw his brother was bipolar. And by the way, these are stories that Doug has told before in interviews on my podcast. That kind of what frustrated me. I'm like, what's new that you're telling me when you told all these stories before? But he said that you were kind of like almost an authority to Axel, and that the father, just like you said, was an authority. So he's like, oh my God, I'm reliving my childhood. And he's like, I couldn't fix my dad and my brother. Let
Stop
me
right
fix
there.
Alan and Axel. Okay.
Stop right there.
Okay.
Okay? Stop right there. Because you've hit a good point. Authority figure to Axel? I was an authority figure to all of them. They were a bunch of fuck ups who Geffen wanted to drop. Eddie Rosenblatt wanted to drop the band before Note 1 of Appetite ever got recorded. When I came on board and signed a contract with them, apparently Rosenblatt told Zoothout that he was going to give me 3 months to turn it around and make it look productive, otherwise the band was going. Tom didn't tell me that until years later, by the way. But when I came on board, as far as Geffen was concerned, if I didn't make it look real within 3 months, they were going to get dropped. They were hellions. No one wanted to manage them. Why was I managing them? Because everybody else said no. Cliff and Peter, Tim Collins, I mean, all of them did not want to do it. I didn't want to do it to start with either. Seduction for me was actually Slash. When I realized, oh, he's really intelligent and charming. There's a
Hmm.
little bit more to this than I thought. You know, that's where I started to get sucked in. Um, but
Well, here's a
I
yeah.
was an authority figure to them all. Okay. Now, they'd gone through all their advances. Um, they were a complete mess. The label wanted to drop them, and that's where I come in the door. When I walk out of the door, they just sold Wembley Stadium. I think I did my job. I think I did my job well. And the way I did my job was the way I had to do it to get the results. Now, are you going to say that I didn't do my job well?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Right.
Well, I dared not say that. Why would I ever say that?
This one I love. He runs around saying, I got Guns N' Roses the best renegotiation ever. Da 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 da
Yes.
da. Fucking bullshit. Okay? The fact of the matter is, it was Bryn Bridenthal who told me, Bryn used to do press at Geffen, and Bryn and I got along really well. And she said, I got some scuttlebutt for you. And I said, oh, really? What's that? Said, Howard Kaufman, who managed Whitesnake, had been in to see David Geffen to ask for a renegotiation of the contract for Whitesnake. And I said, oh, how'd he do? I mean, they deserve it. They've just sold 5 million albums. And Bryn looked at me and said, nah, David never renegotiates a contract ever. And I said, oh. And she said, what was worse was he had already been in and asked and been refused and had come back with David Coverdale thinking that David Geffen would not refuse his star. And I said, oh my God. He got his knees taken out by Geffen in front of David Coverdale. That's embarrassing. And she said, well, yeah. And Tim Collins came in and tried to do the same thing with the Aerosmith contract. And he got shown the door too. So what did that tell me when Bryn told me that? Because obviously I was thinking along similar lines too. It told me that you can't ask David, you have to tell him. Okay. So I had a birthday party for my then wife at the Chardonnay, and I invited Eddie Rosenblatt and his wife to be there. And I sat next to Eddie, and I counted the glasses of wine, and then I turned around to Eddie and I said, Eddie, don't shoot the messenger, but I want you to take a message back to David Geffen. You can tell David that if he doesn't renegotiate the Guns N' Roses contract, I am going to take the band out on tour, and we are not going to deliver the Use Your Illusion album. And I said, well, we'll have a great time. The band will make pots of money, and you won't have a record. So he needs to do that. He left soon after that. I got a phone call from Geffen. I think it was a day or two later. And he demanded that I meet him at the Chardonnay for lunch. And he was there before I was, which was uncommon for David. And as I'm coming up to the table, he starts screaming at me in the restaurant. I will not be bullied. You will not do this. Da 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 da. There was an actress sitting right behind me. Her name was, she had a thing called, I think it was called Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman. Her name was Seymour or something.
Stephanie Seymour?
Not Stephanie Seymour, Jane Seymour.
Not Stephanie, Jane Seymour, forgive me.
Yeah.
GNR on the brain, obviously. Jane Seymour, yes. Dr. Quinn, medicine woman. Beautiful woman, yeah.
And David is screaming and yelling at the top of his voice. And I'm aware of this woman just sinking down in her chair like this. Because this blast of negativity is going past me and into her. And then he got up, stormed out of the restaurant, left me sitting there. We didn't break bread. We didn't order anything to eat. We had no meat. He just stormed off. Which was after I'd looked at him and said, David, I mean what I say. We're going on tour unless you renegotiate this. We're going on tour anyway. But if you don't renegotiate, I'm going to put things on sale.
So we could set a temper tantrum in front of Jane Seymour?
Well, that was part of David. That was part of David's
charm.
No, his methodology. I mean,
fair enough.
He scared a lot of people. I mean, you know, I could tell you a number of things. But
well, there's a.
Anyway, so let me wind up the story here so as you know.
Okay.
So I hear nothing from Tom, from Eddie Rosenblatt, from David Geffen, and I'm looking at the calendar and I'm going, fuck. They think I'm bluffing, and they're going to call it. And once I get to a certain date, I have to start pre-production for the tour. And I'm going, this is bad. So I put Alpine Valley on sale, and it sold out really fast. And that was my last shot across David's bow. I'm serious. We've got our first gig sold out. The other gigs are going to go up soon. And then I get a phone call. And every time I got a phone call from Geffen, it was always imperious. Be in Geffen's office, David's office at such and such a time, you know, and it's like, I could be doing something else, be involved with some other thing. But if I got a phone call, it was always be in David's office at such a time. And I got one of those phone calls. Fuck, here we go. Another screaming match. So I drive up to Geffen. And I used to have this exercise. I don't need to do it these days, but I used to have this exercise. It's a breathing exercise where you breathe in, hold, breathe out, breathe in through the nose, hold up. And I went into his bathroom to do this exercise because I wanted to get myself settled
Hmm.
because I was anticipating another wonderful screaming match. I go into his office and everybody is in there. Gersh, Kolodner, Zootout, Berman, the head of business affairs, a couple of other senior executives, and they were all standing in the bay window. And there was, opposite the bay window was a boarded up fireplace, and there was a small chair there. And Geffen was standing over to one side in front of his drinks table, and he indicated that I should sit on a small chair with all his executives standing looking at me. And I'm looking at this situation, I'm going, what the fuck is going on here? And then David offers me a drink, playing the gracious host, and I'm getting even more disquiet, going, what is he up to? I passed on the drink, and he turned around and he said, okay, Alan, we're going to do the renegotiation. What do you want in the contract? And then I knew what the fucker had done to me. He'd ambushed me. The person who should be talking to Geffen about what goes in the contract is their fucking legal representative, not me. You don't put me on the spot and say, what do you want in the contract? And it was an act of pure fucking intimidation to have all those people in the room and then hit me with that.
How did you respond?
I responded by saying, it's simple, David. I want the best contract on Geffen Records. You can't have that. Oh, and why not? Because David Henley's got it, and he's got a favored nations clause. And I sat there for a moment and I said, you know, it's not a problem, David. We can have exactly the same contract as as Don Henley.
Donington, yeah.
But this is what I'll do. Every time you account to Guns N' Roses, I'll go to the City National Bank and I'll get one uncirculated, pristine, perfect dollar bill, and I will personally send it to Don Henley. And Geffen just fucking glowered at me. And then suddenly said, okay, everybody out. And
Everybody out.
All his executives left. And he said, you stay here, Alan. And when it was just he and I, he said, I'll do this. You'll get the contract. It'll be as good as Henley's. Have the lawyer call. And I went, thank you. And then he couldn't let me go with the victory without trying to undermine my sense of the
Of course
moment.
not.
He leaned into my ear and he said, you know, you might be the Brian Epstein of your day. Which was very disquieting because Brian Epstein died. And some people don't know whether it was a suicide or something else. And he made some bad decisions about merchandising along the way. Brian Epstein is not somebody who I would model myself on, you know.
Fair
And I
enough.
looked out of that and I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck did he mean by that? But anyway, here's the point. Goldstein didn't know I was there. He didn't know what I had said to Eddie Rosenblatt. None of the band did. I did not want any loose lips sinking the ship. This was something that none of them knew about. So when they were busy plotting to get rid of me, Michelle Anthony, his girlfriend, and who was the band lawyer, and Goldstein, they had no idea that this was on the table. Okay, so I already had the commitment from Geffen that they were going to get the best contract on Geffen
Okay.
before I was fired. Now, I've heard some ridiculous stories about him claiming that he beat Geffen up in his own apartment. There is not a bigger pile of fucking horseshit than that. According to Tom Zootout, who told me about it, when the lawyers told, because I obviously called G&R's lawyers and said, we're in for a renegotiation. You need to get with Geffen. You need to do this, da 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 da. They obviously told the band and Doug what had been done. Now, what I'd done is I'd got somebody who never, ever had renegotiated an extant contract and made him agree to do it, and not only agree to do it, but make sure that it was as good as it could be, as good as Henley's. He had already made that commitment to me.
You know, it's interesting, and I'm glad you brought up the yeah, because there is a story that Doug told me about going to Geffen's house
Oh,
and
no, hold on, hold on.
okay,
What I heard from Zoothow was typically, I mean, Dougie could be a really, some people would say he was very friendly and charming. I would sometimes say he was just obsequious. But the obsequious version of Doug went to Geffen and begged him to keep the contract in place because if he did that, that would secure him looking after the band and getting the management position and keep everything on an even keel. That's what happened.
okay, so yeah, so yes, there is a story. It's not, I hadn't heard your version of that before, so I
It's not
know
my version, it's the
version.
actuality.
Forgive me. Yes, the actuality of it. Doug's version. Let's just say Doug's version that happened after the fact. But we mentioned
By the
you meant.
way, by the way, one more thing. I never heard it myself. I only have it from third hand. But I was told that when they were out on that tour, that Axel had a code name for Doug.
I don't know that.
When they when he was on stage and they had walkie-talkies and things, and Axel wanted Doug. Do you know what what he'd yell into the walkie-talkie?
The only
Apparently,
name, the only name I know they referred to him as was Dougie. So I assume that was not it.
he used to call him Mr. Bullshit.
Oh, Mr. Bullshit. Okay.
Get me Mr. Bullshit. I want Mr. Bullshit now. Now, I never heard that, but I did hear it from more than one person.
So you mentioned it before about the firing and what Guns N' Roses have or haven't done since your departure, which I think there are just a lot of variables to blame. But or just reasons why. I don't even want to say blame, just reasons why, because I don't know firsthand. I only know stories from you, Doug, things I've read. I don't know.
There is only one reason why. Axel got
Axel.
control of everything. Axel got control of everything.
So we got to get into those specifics because this is I know where you disagree, and I guess need to let the listeners know this is kind of the jumping off point for you. Yes, Doug was hired as a tour manager, but there was a point, I think 88, where again, he alleges that Axel, yeah, he was always ready to fire you, but was really going to fire you this time. Say, I'm not going to the next show. And I guess I have to start there because yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of levels to this. So apparently, Axel had allegedly, or whatever, you're better with words than me, had just had his annulment from Aaron Everly. And Axel had called Doug, told him of this news, and he's like, "Okay, great. I know this is being weighed heavily on you. I'm glad we can move on. You can move on. Yada yada." And at the time, Doug said that you and Axel weren't really on speaking terms, and thought that this would be a good opportunity for you guys to kind of bury the hatchet or whatever, just say, "Hey, I'm sorry this happened with you. Move on. Just kind of like start from a square one kind of place." And that you had answered it in a really, I don't know, just like not in a mean way. That's the best way I could put it. That's what he alleges that you said. You called him a failure. That his marriage failed because that's who he is. And Axel hung up, called Doug back, said, "That's it. I need him gone." And Doug's like, "Oh shit, I don't know what I'm gonna do now."
Absolute lie.
And well, that's where it bleeds into the story that this last.
Absolute lie. Um,
Okay.
just before I was in the Meadowlands at a gig in the Meadowlands, and somebody came out of the production office and said, Axel's on the phone. And I went to the phone and I went, hey, Axel, what's up? And he said, I can't work with you anymore. And I said something like, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll be back in a day or so. Let's go and have dinner and talk about it. And if you still feel the same way, then that's what we do. All right. The last time I'd spoken to him before that was 2 days before that. And he called me at home, and the main thing on his mind was, why is it difficult for me to get people to do what I want them to do? And I said, you can be a bit prickly. You scare people. I've often wondered if in his mind he thought I said, you can be a prick.
I think you've told me this. Okay, right.
I,
But it had nothing to do with Aaron. It had nothing to do
no,
with.
no,
Okay.
it had nothing to do with
I
Aaron.
mean, that was pretty specific, and that's kind of what I alluded
I
to
mean,
before. I want to get these stories out, so if he ever comes out with his
the
book,
whole
you don't get, get
the
sued.
whole thing with Aaron, I will tell you, is if I would have said anything, it would have been, I think you're better off out of it. Aaron used to wind him up all the fucking time. Why did we have a fucking riot at the Phoenix Celebrity Theatre? Because Aaron was fighting with Axel up in the hotel room, and and that was it. And he wouldn't come down. And more than once, I picked him up from his home and took him to my home because he and Aaron are fighting, and I was fucking scared that it would get dangerously physical at some point. Aaron was constantly winding him up.
He
I was
Doug
not.
agreed with that. He did say that about
I am
Aaron.
not. I was not a fan of Erin of that time. I don't know who she is now. She's probably a lovely woman with kids and a
Sure.
family and so on and so forth. But then she was a little minx
I like that word.
and caused problems.
Okay.
All right. I'm spending every single day. Keep this in mind. My joy in making rock and roll pretty much came to an end in September of 86. When I signed the contract with GNR, because from then on, it was pressure, anxiety, and stress all the time. We're in Toronto, second or third day on their very first tour with the Cult. The first two shows had been somewhere like Moncton and somewhere, I can't remember exactly. And I could only get to the third show. And I just dropped my bags on my bed, and there's a bang on the door. I go to the door, and there's Izzy. And he looks frazzled. He pushes past me, goes into the room, flops into the sofa. I turn around and go, Izzy, what's up? What's wrong? That fucker makes us fucking miserable every fucking day. It's a quote I'll never forget.
I mean,
That
that's
was
his
Izzy.
childhood friend. That sucks.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, Izzy and I used to spend a lot of time together, and I don't think it's that much of a secret that Izzy found it difficult to have to deal with Axel. Was
Well,
not,
that's why he left. That's why he famously left. Yeah, of course. I mean,
yeah,
that's well known.
yeah, was not thrilled when he turned up in LA. And he made that trip to LA twice, I think. It was only on the second time round that he managed to, stay the course. I mean, that's just Axel. It's no secret he had a really tough childhood. And I think there are some incredible scars that he's had to live with. And I find it interesting that he never managed to get a marriage going, and he's never had kids. And I don't think it's purely selfishness. I think it relates back to things to his childhood. He went through a tough childhood.
Yeah, no, and
And,
that's
and,
it's on
and I'll
record.
tell you, and I always took that into consideration. But he's not exactly Mr. Go Along, Get Along.
You know, you mentioned something again, keeping on the subject of Axel, the celebrity theater. It's something else that was a story that lives kind of rent free in my head. That what the no show because of fighting with Aaron. That this is when Doug was there. He was just security. I was just tour manager at the time. Had no. It was still early on in his tenure. That Axel wasn't there, and this I think this was at the airport. That gathered the guys around and said, we need to fire him. We need to fire Axel."
Bullshit. Let's
Okay.
get it right. Okay.
I guess I'll finish the end of it, and you can tell me that
No,
that's
you
all
don't
bull.
have to finish the
Okay.
end of it
Okay.
because
Fair.
I can hear all the crap already. All right.
Okay.
We were at the airport. In fact, there was a moment when Axel walked past me, glowering. I mean, the guy is really good at showing his mood with his body language. You know, you just kind of, he was glowering. I had breakfast with the band there, and this is what I told them. I said, you need to make up your mind if you're keeping Axel as a singer. But this commitment I will make to you. If you guys decide you want to find a different singer, I will not drop you. I will I will still stay as your manager if that's something you want to go through. I don't want you to be in a situation where you cannot make an important decision because you're afraid of the knock on that if he goes, then, you know, I'll probably go too because it's a band with no singer. I've got other things to do. I've got a band that is developing very nicely, and I'm having to spend an awful lot of time on Guns N' Roses that I could be spending on this other band that I've been working with
Great
since
White.
1982. All right.
Mhm.
So what I told them was, it's up to you.
Okay. So there was no situation where, after the fact, Slash goes up to Doug in a sundry store and asked his opinion. Say, what do you think we should do? And Doug didn't want to answer, saying that's not my place. I'm not the manager. And it's like, no, come on, tell me, what would you do? Would you keep Axel? He's like, well, if you're gonna fire him, you're not gonna fire him at the end of at the beginning of an album cycle. You're gonna wait. You just put out Appetite. So it's like he
There was
he's
only
thinking
one
that
person. There was only one person who whose opinion need to be sought and discussed, and that was Tom Zutaut, the A&R man at Geffen. That's the only person that issue should have been discussed with. And Tom was adamant. Tom was, we've got to keep Axel.
sure. Um, well, it leads me to again going way back in our conversation as we're about an hour into it, and just it flies by, doesn't it, Alan? Just
Has
flying
that been
by.
an hour already? Wow.
Yeah, something like that. Uh, so there was. I know we discussed this off the air that, and I know you're going to say at the beginning it's a lie, but just bear with me that you were really about to be fired. Doug believes that in order to keep Axel and the band and everyone together, you had to bring him on as a partner because he was so close with Axel. And
Bullshit.
I know, well, I said 50-50. That's what whatever. So I know, bullshit. Okay. So after that happens, after that
God,
Aaron thing,
the guy cannot open his mouth without spilling out bullshit and lies. Oh my God.
there, there was
I
so
heard a
many.
great story about him at a dinner.
Well, I don't know if oh, is it too personal? I don't want to get overly too personal. I want to get like GNR focus and stories that where if he decides, 'cause
I
I
thought
don't know
the
if he's
one
putting.
thing I thought the one thing that would be worth talking about was his relationship with Michel Anthony and they were the ones who conspired to get rid of me and encouraged Axel to do it. This is a woman who Peter Paterno used to be the band's counsel, and Peter left to go and start Hollywood Records for Disney, which he had to be replaced. And Peter asked me to consider another person in the firm called Michelle Anthony. So, I got with Michelle, and I rather thought that having a woman involved in an environment that some might describe as misogynistic at times would be healthy. And Peter's recommendation obviously meant a lot to me. So I said, yeah, we'll take on Michelle. There was one night after a dinner, Doug boasted to me. I didn't know I thought he might have just been bullshitting. Boasted to me that he'd driven her home and been intimate with her. And I remember very much the phrase I used. I said, "You keep your fucking pen out of the company inkwell." And I thought that was the end of it. But apparently not. They were an item for a while and obviously thought that they were going to be the power company. They were going to get rid of me. Doug was going to take over and she was the band attorney. This was a big step up for her in profile. And it stood her well. I mean, this woman now is number 2 at UMG, head of recorded music. This is a person who cannot write a song, produce a record, or as far as I'm concerned, employ astute judgment, because her and Goldstein, between them, managed to have Guns N' Roses completely fall fucking apart. And Axel being disgruntled with me, he was constantly disgruntled with me. Do you know how many times he said thank you to me?
Zero?
Never once.
It's funny. I was just watching.
Not once in what, 5-6 years. Not once did he turn around and say, "You know what, Nib? It's pretty cool where we're at. Thank you." Not once. Izzy Slash.
I was actually just watching because it was the anniversary of the American Music Awards, where Slash and Duff were cursing up a storm, and even through all the cursing and the slurring of words, Slash said, "Thank you, Alan Niven." He said, "Thank you, Doug Goldstein," as well, but he got his thank yous in there. through
Slash was kind enough to say thank you when he was inducted into that bullshit organization, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. What a load of crap that is.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other.
I am not a fan of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It goes against the very idiom of rock and roll by institutionalizing what should not be institutionalized. Anyway,
No,
let's not go off on that.
no, I agree. I actually had to work the radio broadcast of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year, and I'm just like, yeah, there are people who deserve it, and there are people who really just don't deserve it.
Listen,
Like, it's not a rock. It's not the Music Hall of Fame. Maybe we can have a conversation, but it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
the stories and the prurients are merely amusing gossip for those who have got nothing better to do.
Oh, yeah.
What you can do is look at it from a historical perspective, which we've already mentioned. This is where they were when I came on board. This is where they were.
Okay, so let's
kick me to the curb.
let's get there.
Thereafter, you get one shitty album of rotten covers, and you get a boring solo album, and that's all that happened since 1991.
I will just say, I understand where you're coming from. I enjoyed the spaghetti incident and Chinese democracy, but I digress. I get what you're. Hey, they were good punk rock songs to begin with, so now then he's covered them.
What's the point of doing it? It's
To delay the next the album that never came.
yeah.
The album that was supposed to be Chinese democracy.
No point in doing it. I mean, it's anti-punk to do a cover of a punk song. It goes against the spirit of it.
I mean, I like that they encourage people to look up the originals and the original artist got all the royalties. I
People
think
did
that's kind
that
of
for
cool.
themselves. People did that for themselves.
All
Never
right.
mind the bollocks went gold in the wake of the sales of Appetite for Destruction. Did you know that?
I was not
It,
aware of that.
yeah, it was stuck at somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 sales, and then it started to sell again in the wake of Appetite. People go and find out for themselves. We talked about the Sex Pistols enough, but that's what took it to gold.
Here's a jumping off point, a story that's been on the tip of my tongue since we've been talking. And again, I think this is good because if he ever decides to put out his book, I know he wanted to work with me again like a year ago, but I'm like, I got a kid now. I don't got time for this. Like, it's a different relationship now. I can't do it, but I'm gonna help him by getting stories out there so he won't be sued by you later on. So it's a reminder, I'm helping him. So, so he's obviously I've told you this before. We talked about it. He maintains that he didn't want you fired. He was there for you. When you were finally fired, he didn't make a decision yet whether to stay with you because he maintains his loyalty because you gave him his first shot. You bought him like a car, an apartment. You were he maintains that. How wonderful you were to him to getting this opportunity. But he goes to your place, and much like you're kind of smoking I don't know what exactly it is now. He's a stogie. Do I sound like I know what I'm talking about? What are you smoking right now, Alan?
It's
What do you
called a
have?
cheroot.
A cerut?
Cheroot.
A
Yeah.
cheroot. So he said you had maybe
Have you-
a
I did.
cigar in your mouth at the time. So it's kind of appropriate that you're smoking something now while during this. I mean, you've been smoking it all episode, but still, it's kind of cool to know that you kind of have the same habits. Anyway, like he got in the hot tub with you, and you said just really, again, allegedly mean stuff about Axel. Really mean, like wishing him, I hate him. I wish him harm. Like, I can't, fuck this guy. And that's when Doug decided, like, I can't believe Alan would say these things. That's it. I'm staying with Guns N' Roses. He wanted to get across that he hadn't made up his mind until he spoke with
Number
you.
one, I never invited him into my jacuzzi.
Okay.
Ever. All right. That is first and foremost. I
Okay.
never invited him in my jacuzzi. Um, and he was planning and plotting to take over for a long time. Um, we all know it.
Okay.
Those of us who were there, we all know it. He was planning. I mean, I told you about Tom Zutaut coming into the dinner and leaning into my ear and saying, Doug Goldstein's not your friend. Well, I didn't think he was much of a friend anyway, but I thought there was a chance he might be a loyal employee.
Here's something that he mentioned that really hit home, and I wanted to focus on this a lot. Kind of a different. This was after the tragedy in Dokken,
Donington,
not Donington. Forgive me, sorry. In Donington, and you guys had an adjoining room, and I guess you were drinking that night. No harm, no foul there. You He knocks on the adjoining room. You knock on the adjoining room door. You answer. You're in your underwear, and you open your heart to Doug and say, "I love you. You've taught me to trust again. Thank you." And he just said, because again, I'm trying to get across the good parts of what he wishes he could say if he did connect with you, at least from what I remember. That he's like, that was like a big moment between you two. I mean, you were, like you said, you were inebriated. You may have no memory of this, but he remembered and just thought that's where your relationship was. Like you just were different, but at the same time,
bullshit.
okay, okay. Well,
Absolute fucking bullshit. At the hotel after the gig, Slash and I went to the bar. We were sitting on stools at the bar, and I felt an arm go around my shoulders, and somebody was draping their arm around Slash's shoulder at the same time. And this idiotic voice said, "Why are you guys so down? 3 or 4 people die at a South American football match every weekend." It was fucking
David Lee Roth.
Yeah, I was just stunned at what he
He
said. I left the bar, I went upstairs, and I don't mind admitting that I locked the door and I cried my eyes out. I was
understandably.
totally fucking destroyed by what had happened that day and having to deal with it. And nobody came into my room, and I wasn't inebriated, and I wasn't drinking. I'd had maybe two with Slash by that point, but once idiot,
David Lee Roth.
yeah. I mean, what an inane thing to say,
Because
you know.
this is
Af-
fascinating. Sorry,
After,
continue.
after that, I was up to my room, and the condition I was in emotionally, I wasn't talking to anybody. I think I got on the phone and called one of my London friends to talk to him about it, but I was devastated.
And understandably so. And he recalled the entire band being devastated, particularly Duff and Axel. And this is what's fascinating, and to show you how the different stories and fans, it's up to you to decide who's telling the truth. So something I've told before, maybe I don't know, or at least he said it. The reason why I was able to fill in the blank with David Lee Roth is because in his Doug's version, Axel goes to David Lee Roth and said, and he knew of Doug's relationship with David Lee Roth because he had worked security on the Eat 'em and Smile tour. He had done some legs of the 1984 tour, so they had a relationship there. Say, hey, can you introduce me to David Lee Roth? I know he's been touring a lot longer than me. Like, does he have any advice on how to handle something like this? And to the effect, he said something like what you just said. Hey, it's, Europe. People die of soccer matches every day. Come on, man. It's something like really like heartless that you can sadly picture David Lee Roth saying in his voice.
Yeah,
But so it happened with you and Slash, not Doug and Axel.
yes,
That's very fascinating. Like,
yeah.
did he just borrow a story? I don't know.
He borrows stories all the time. I saw a fleeting. I don't want to see his fucking face
Oh, I'm sorry.
at any time.
I'm
He
sorry.
destroyed one of the greatest rock and roll bands in the world.
I
It's
mean,
the encapsulation. But I caught a thing where he was starting to say something, and he was about to appropriate that he was significant in how I got Axel to the Colosseum at the Rolling Stones show. All right. And he was going to promote. Let me tell you, when Axel was looking like a no show at the Stones, do you know what Doug was doing? Bawling his eyes out. He didn't know what to do. Tour manager.
he's told me stories about getting into helicopters and getting Axel from the hotel, so which is the opposite of crying. That he once flew a helicopter, so
Well, he might have
the
done
truth
that.
lies somewhere between crying and
He
a
might,
helicopter.
fuck, he might have done that after 1991.
He might have, yeah, that might have been
I
after.
don't know what he did after 1991, except nothing.
So here's something you bring up, and I gotta put whatever demise of the old version of Guns N' Roses. I personally can't put that on Doug, because what is he supposed to do? And he said with like Chinese democracy, he's getting called into, Geffen's office. He's getting called, and he's like, by Jimmy Iovine, I believe. Like, where's my record? Where's my record? Okay, you go in and you tell Axel where's my record and see how he responds. Like, it's up to Axel whether to do something or not to do something. So what is only you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, and maybe he just survived that long by not pushing him too hard where everybody
Once upon a
wanted.
time, we had a band and we had a band chemistry, we had a band dynamic. Okay? It wasn't all down to Axel. An awful lot of what happened with GNR in the early days was in spite of Axel, not because of. Okay?
So what
After,
changed?
after what changed? After 1991, I'm gone and Izzy's gone. Then it's all about Axel, and Doug is just his butler. I mean, for God's sake, he got a housekeeper to be his manager. What does that tell you? Did he work with Irving Azoff? Did he work with Doc McGee? The one thing I will say is I take my hat off to her. She's got
It's
him through an awful lot of shows, and I know what he's like, and I know what it took to get things done, and I think she has done amazingly.
she has, because there are stories that I don't feel privy that are right for me to share and that don't involve you. About just what she's done for Axel.
Oh, I'll talk to you about one or two stories involving her off air.
Oh, yeah, sorry everyone,
Yeah,
but I mean,
yeah,
but
it'll
but
be off air.
it comes down to, and I think what it came down to the, unfortunately, what it sounds like from Axel's perspective, if I may, is a trust thing, where for whatever reason he seemed to trust, whether it was a systematic thing by Doug, trusting him more than you, or he trusts Beta more than these other managers. Because I love doing the on these this day thing and on social media. And forgive me, I need to just
You're
I never.
wrong. It's not a trust thing. It's a control thing with Axel.
Okay.
He
Well,
wants to be in control. Here's another little snapshot that is illuminating and goes to forming a correct perception. Axel takes 50% of the income of Guns N' Roses now.
currently he takes half of it.
Yes, 50%. Okay? That to me is anathema. He is not Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses were a collective. They were five individuals. It was a chemistry. It was a moment. But Axel wants to be in control of everything all the time. And look what that gets you. A boring solo record and a shitty thing of punk covers. And that's it.
Listen to There Was a Time. Listen to the guitar solo from Buckethead. So just if give it a second chance, if I may.
Oh,
But
a solo in the middle of a song that you don't really care about.
I know
This,
I love your where you're coming from, because it's a different. We talked about this. You were there almost at ground zero, because obviously before you were there when they got signed, not when they started. Me, my first opportunity to see them live was not the real Guns N' Roses, I guess, was with Buckethead. So my perception is very different. I became like a fan as a child when they already had broken up and Use Your Illusions were out and everything. So my perception is very different. And that's what I love about this podcast, different perceptions, whether you are just a fan or worked with them. But to go back to before, there was, whether it holds true to today or not, and go back to Beta, I recently, because I do on this day stuff, and there's a great, it's basically the Guns N' Roses library. It's called Appetite for Discussion. It's a good thing I didn't name my podcast that. It's brilliant. The curators of that, almost every article and video interview from like almost the beginning, it's insane, from all sorts of languages. So there's one with Beta from, I don't know, early 2000s, something like that, that said that she said to Axel, "No more managers. Like, you keep going through managers. They keep trying to get you to reunite the old band. You're unhappy. No more managers." And that's kind of when it started there, when he has this Team Brazil around him, that it's sort of, and that he has this family that he's never had, in theory,
yeah.
growing up
And he
around
also
him.
has a solo career instead of the band Guns N' Roses.
See, which is just
And what did
which
they have to do? And what did they have to do in the end?
well, what
The promoters were not coming forward with guarantees of 3 million a show when it was just Axel. As soon as he got Slash and Duff back, that was
right.
enough. All right. So you know, let's call a spade a spade a spade. He had a solo career with her, with Beta, and they needed at least those two back to actually be able to go out there and make it work with the kind of guarantees that the promoters were not prepared to give to Axel as a solo artist. He'd run his course.
I mean, also given the history of the no shows on that Chinese Democracy tour, I'm glad I caught the last one before it, completely went to shit. But Doug maintains that he tried to convince Axel that this is a solo thing, but Axel was just like, "Hey, I built Guns N' Roses. All those guys left me, they left Guns N' Roses. This is still my thing. Well, that says your response right there. So that was his feeling, is that he felt abandoned by everybody in
Well,
his mind.
well, he would. I mean, some people talk about the victim zeitgeist that we have in our social environment at the moment.
Mm.
For good reason, Axel's really good at the victim zeitgeist. And I think that comes from the terrible childhood he had.
Yeah, and that's something for everybody. I mean, we all have trauma to speak, and that's what he's gone through. It's nothing I would ever take away, and that's something I also bring up uh, often in mental health conversations, and not to try to give an excuse for a certain behavior, but when you try to explain it, you could see why there are trust issues here, and if you don't have the proper treatment, which was not available like it is now. Early 90s, it was not available. So, when you talk about Guns N' Roses now,
Here's a question for you.
yes.
Ask Axel what joy he thought I got from GNR.
What joy that you got or what joy that he
Yeah, that
got?
I got. You know, it's all about Axel. It's all about Axel. It's Axel's the center of the universe.
I mean, I would
Why,
love to ask him
why did
anything, but
Izzy leave?
well, it's interesting that well, it seems like Izzy was worried about becoming an addict again. You can tell me that, right? And was did not uh, the inconsistency of Axel showing up, the latenesses, and I think just the time on the road. Weren't all those factors for
Listen, GNR was an impossible situation that exploded in our faces. None of us knew or were prepared for it to be as huge in its impact as it was.
which is what makes it so special.
And, and with Izzy, he was never comfortable with that level of acclaim, with, and there are so many aspects of it. Um,
Do
you
you know what
notice
he,
how people change the way that they deal with you. There's an obsequious deference that comes into play in dealing with some people. You're not sure who to trust. I'll tell you this, more than once I've turned around to the wife and I said, I never had more people around me and never felt lonelier.
Mhm.
There was my sense of trust was incredibly brittle, and it'd be stupid things. It would be like one of the executives of Geffen, his wife worked at Vogue, phoning up wanting Axel to do a photo spread in furs in the Vogue. And immediately my reaction is, well, that's going to do the street cred of my band a lot of good, and it's coming from somebody within Geffen, and you've got to deal with it and deal with it gracefully and let it down gracefully. You know, there was stuff like that all the time. There was the guy Sugarman,
Danny Sugarman?
yeah, sent me a letter saying he wanted to talk to Axel and write a book about him, about how he was such a trickster and so on and so forth. And the thing that got me was that the letter came on Doors letterhead with the Doors logo at the top from Danny Sugarman. And I'm going, who the fuck does he think he is? He's not a member of the Doors. You know, do I want this person in our volatile environment? No, I don't. Get rid of him. People like Herb Ritts. I mean, Axel got Stephanie Seymour out of a folder of photographs. He picked her out of a Herb Ritts folder. I mean, and this guy was positioning himself between the models and the successful rockers for his own benefit. just the kind of weasel that you don't want in a volatile environment.
I can't
I mean,
imagine.
it was endless.
I'm sure it was endless then, and I'm sure it's endless now. So you mentioned again, alluding to now, and the 50% that allegedly, or you tell me that Axel is making. So what does that mean? Slash and Duff are making 20% each? Is that is that why there is no reunion? Like what Izzy said, because it's not
Yes,
just.
that's why Izzy's not there.
Uh, that's just sad. I think that's a lot of fans feel that way, as excited as many of us are for the tour this coming year, and for someone like me who didn't initially see Axel and Slash coming up, this reunion of sorts was the first opportunity. So I'm looking forward to. I want to take my son, but when you see, Izzy's out there, he made a not necessarily a public appearance, but Bernard Fowler shared a picture of him from the Rolling Stones because he went to a Stone show. So we saw an Izzy appearance this year, and Steven's still touring, and it's just like, man, money, you guys are all still alive, and you see all
Do
this.
it once.
Do you think it'll happen once?
They,
As
they, they should. They should do it once and film it, and But does Izzy wanted to do that around the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing, um, and he set up a meeting to talk it over with Axe and persuade him. Let's just do it for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then it's done, and we can say thank you, good night. And apparently, Axel didn't turn up for the meeting. So one more time, Izzy was frustrated and annoyed.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a history of being stood up by somebody and they do it again, I understand that. Do you think something? Because Izzy has made, and it's been a few years. He's made appearances with Axel when he was with the other incarnation of Guns N' Roses, and you broke on this podcast that he showed up at a rehearsal. I mean, is there
You know,
still a friendship there? Do you think? 'Cause
I've no idea.
no.
I've
Okay.
no idea. Um, but you would hope that at some point that they could be able to sit down and have a pot of tea and some crumpets together, and you know, and have some sort of sense of perspective and acknowledge that, yeah, you did something in your lives,
I mean, they really
and
did. I
you
mean,
and you did it together. It would be nice, and it, it would be appropriate to do that at some point.
especially this year being the 40th anniversary of the band that Izzy
Oh, good God.
co-founded. Yeah, uh, 40 years, Alan. It's not
Really.
to not to make you feel any older than you may do, but and another name I do want to mention, and I don't want to keep you here forever, but there are certain stories I want to mention while I do got you, is Steven Adler, and he recently turned 60 years old. I mean, happy birthday, Steven! Belated birthday. The fact that he's still around is, I mean, all these guys, the fact that it's still around is incredible. But there's always that issue.
That was something that Doug and I put a lot of work into.
Well, here's the thing that Doug spoke a lot about the rehabs he would take Steven to, that he would try talking to his parents to figure out what's going on, and that it was really him and Axel that tried to keep him on board and push the blame onto you and Slash for saying, okay, we can't continue, we can't record, we got to move on, we got to
That's
fire him.
bullshit too. Axel was the one who was determined that he went.
Okay, he says
Doug
Axel
ever
was the
tell you?
last one.
Yeah, did Doug ever tell you the story of what Steven Adler did to Aaron Everly?
I'm afraid to ask.
All right.
I don't think I know. I don't, do I want to know that story? Is I got to get Steven in
No, you
trouble?
don't want to know that story.
Okay. Well, I don't know any that story. I guess
Yeah, Steven's lucky to be alive for more than one reason.
I guess we'll leave it at that because as I'm trying to help, if he's working on his book, for him not to get sued, I don't want to get sued by some stories that I don't know people get mad at. And plus, I don't know, Steven, like a lot of these guys, like Axel, we're talking about how he was. Like you just hope they're in a good place now. What they're all in their 60s now. Is there a part of you where you have these memories that are, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but whether they're bitter memories or just not fond memories of,
No, it's not bitter. Um,
what would you describe it like? Is there any sort of like, we know about Doug, but with Axel to be like, hey, look what we did before we die.
yeah,
Look what we did. Let's talk.
I'd have a cup of tea with him, no problem. The one person I would never have, two people I'd never have a cup of tea with. One is Doug Goldstein, the other one is Michel Anthony, the band
Okay.
boy. Those two.
He said that.
Because my perspective on that is you are the two who fucked up one of the greatest rock and roll bands that the world has ever seen.
I'm pretty sure, and this like could be getting my memory fuzzy of someone else's, that he felt because Doug left. He said he quit. 2000. It's on record. 2004, and that's when before Chinese came out. When Merck, I can't say his last name, took over, and he felt that Michelle Anthony kind of turned his back on him. So I don't even know if Doug and Michelle Anthony they have any sort of a. I think she said some stuff in Slash's book about Doug, maybe throwing him under the bus, so he felt betrayed. And again, he claims that. Again, we I don't want to summarize it because we've
Well, it's a whole
ad
different
nauseam.
program. It's a whole different program to talk about Michel Anthony, but
Sure.
I will send you an email
Okay.
where, if you want, I'll give you some pointers onto some research as to who she is and what she does. And oh, by the way, while we're talking about the head of recorded music for UMG, let's just consider the fact that most of their artists are being chronically ripped off because they give away the music to streaming sites for almost nothing, but they also are co-owners or total owners of the streaming sites. It's a form of theft, and she presides over that.
I can't imagine. I mean, I speak to some of the musicians today, just how difficult it is. I mean, just from to compare a little bit, just being in a podcast. I mean, just the money that I make off YouTube. I mean, YouTube is really making most of the money, and same thing with Facebook and any of that. But this is the system. I don't know. I That's why bands just like they need to keep touring. That's the and then that keeps getting harder. So I don't know what it's a sad state of music now, but just support live music when you can. And that's my wife and
Well,
I. That's why my wife's taking my son to Dave Matthews right now. She's supporting it.
it goes to levels and levels. I mean, we could have a long conversation one night about whether rock and roll was deliberately destroyed. We could talk about people like Rockefeller, who famously said, "I don't want educated people. I want workers." And one thing about rock and roll that I loved and was really important to me was that it can be the voice of the vast disenfranchised. It can speak truth to power.
Can no.
You go back and you look at your Dylans and your Lennons and so on. Um, those that run the country and the people who really run the country, we don't see in the newspapers, we don't see in the TV, the mega, mega, mega rich. But, just that little quote from Rockefeller, "I don't want educated people. I want workers." And there are moments when I'm maybe having a cheroot when I sit there and go, the way that rock and roll is being deconstructed is deliberate. Because it's fine to have really dark metal people out there who just yell negativities and who aren't really artists. It's fine to have vacuous, sound alike little girls coming off the Disney conveyor belt for bimbos, you know? That
You
keeps
gotta.
that keeps people stupid. People like Dylan and Lennon and even a Tom Petty. And I thought Axel was going to be one of these. could tell people some truth and state some truth to power. I thought he was going to develop really well when he wrote Civil War. Civil War was something that I was really thrilled about.
That's something that I really wish, because he is not just with songwriting, and obviously, Izzy's songwriting speaks for itself, but Axel's songwriting and writing and speaking, you talk about whether you want to label it wasted time or what has Guns N' Roses put out since your departure, since your firing. It's just, I would like to see Axel do more, whether it's solo, whether it's a book. I would like to see him do more because I think he can speak truth to power, and there are so many that listen. I know he had his little Twitter moments, but he doesn't really do that anymore. But we're in a world that reacts and
I, you know,
criticizes, and
what-
it's
if
difficult.
I was sitting having a cup of tea with Axel, I'd look at him and I go, you know what I think you should do? I think you should go fucking Bob Dylan. You should go acoustic, and you should write a political album where you point out what needs to be pointed out. You're a
I think that would be
working class,
awesome.
yeah, you're a working class guy. Fuck the electric side of the band, do it acoustic, and just make those lyrics really count. That's what I'd say to him. Go do that.
I have no qualms with that. I know there are those who say, which is a silly argument, keep politics out of music. What? What politics? They are like married. Like there's so much you can go back into early, hymns and songs that are about political things. So I always thought that was such a
Keep politics out of music is as smart as saying keep politics out of intelligence,
right.
right?
I know. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that.
Well, you got me more animated than I've been in a long time.
Well, I don't know if that's either good or bad because sometimes I watch my guests whenever I bring something up that may be, and I always act like just like we did, speak off the air in my 500 episodes, whether it's Guns N' Roses itself, whether it's like when I had the Skid Row guys on, I'm like, okay, we don't need to talk about Sebastian Bach, but if we do, we could do it like this, and I just watch their mood and I see if they're getting really animated. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to push too hard. I'm not like Stern. I don't want to be like Howard Stern where you keep pushing and making people uncomfortable. It's a
Yeah.
conversation. Sometimes it
Well,
gets a little animated.
Howard Stern is so tiresomely obnoxious. I cannot abide Howard Stern. He's always going for the lowest of the low.
It's
He's always
funny.
trying to push buttons and be rude and so on. And I don't find a shock jock particularly anything. I mean, that's that's not your higher purpose. That's not the best of. When you're making records, when you're putting your time into songs, you're trying to put out things that reach people. Here's the point of rock and roll is that it suspends alienation and it brings people together. And here's the important point, by their own consent. We live in a totally coercive world, whether we want to take it on state laws, federal laws, traffic laws, religious pressure, so on and so forth. But you pick up a guitar and you sing me a song, and I recognize the spirit and the intelligence within the song that you're singing, and it's a willing bridge of humanity that connects us. It's not coerced. And in that, we recognize each other and acknowledge each other. And at its best, that's what rock and roll does. People say, what's the point, Guns N' Roses? Well, for me, standing up for the worth of all souls, including urchins from under the street, to use the lyric,
Mm.
and standing up for individuality is really worthwhile. And when I look back and I look at that incredible blue collar response that we got in 1988, I think that's what was happening there. It was people were going, here's somebody who I understand, here are people I understand, and here are people who are singing and speaking in ways that are meaningful to us and show a respect of our worth.
And that's why we're still talking about them, or at least I
Yes,
am, 40 years later.
yes, yeah.
But
I think that's it, Brando. I think
but
that's
we're
it.
we're also not talking about it. We're writing about it, or have written about it, right, Alan? So I guess you have a little announcement to make. I know I've alluded to it
That's not a
before.
little announcement. You can go on the web and see. There's a
Okay.
on June 24 is the publishing date of something that I finally got off my fucking back. If I had $1 for everybody saying, "When are you going to write the book?" You know, and I did
I've
try
said
it
it.
once. Yeah, I did try it once. I got about three-quarters of the way through it, and I sent it to somebody to see what they would think, and they came back and said, "It's great, finish it." And my response was, "Fucking thank you, Slash. I was hoping that you would say, I don't want this book out there, put it on a shelf, because I was looking for an excuse to shelve it, because I had no joy in writing the book.
Mm.
It was tiresome. It was a chore. It was not a happy experience. And I was looking for someone to give me an excuse to put it on the shelf. So then I just had to put it on the shelf myself. And a couple of people kept hounding and hounding and hounding, one of whom deals with writers on a daily basis because he oversees something like a dozen magazines. And he finally pushed me over. And I finally got to a point of, you're really slow, dumb, and stupid. You don't like rock and roll books because they all have the same story arc,
Hmm.
all right? And they're boring and they're self justifying and they apportion blame because that's the story arc. It's everybody's wonderful together until success and money start to pull things apart. And it becomes about control and who gets what and girlfriends and whatever. They all have the same story arc. But you're now just an old jukebox. And if you're sitting in the corner of the kitchen, somebody might pour you a glass of port and you tell a story. And if they enjoy the story, they pour you another glass of port and you tell another story. And you just tell stories. There's no chronological arc. There is no sense of when I was a boy, my dad used to work at the fish market, and he'd come home and he'd beat me with an old cod, and none of that, none of that self-justification of why I got into rock and roll in the first place. All that stuff that people write. I got to the point going, if you're going to do a book, just tell stories. They don't have to be chronological. Just hopefully they're amusing. Maybe they're illuminating. Perhaps there's a tiny little germ of wisdom in the stories that you tell and you choose. So that's what I did. So I just sat at the computer and typed out a bunch of stories. And that's what the publisher liked. So that's what it's going to be. And it's not a Guns N' Roses book. It's not an Alan Niven book. It's just a book of stories in which a lot of the time I am participating in, but it's not about me. It's about the people in the stories. And it's about a lot of people, not just GNR. It's not a GNR book.
I love that for you, from you. Congratulations. I can't wait
Well, thank you.
to read the whole thing. You sent me the intro, and just from that I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to read it. And just from a wannabe author to a soon-to-be author, it just had a lot of what I was trying to do. Where yes, a lot of books are the same with the same arc, and it is about stories. It's about lessons and trying to do things a little
Yeah.
bit differently. But you with your way of words, and I will definitely have to have my dictionary and thesaurus ready while, while reading it for sure. Because I,
No, you won't. It's really straightforward. It's crisp. It's not convoluted.
how many pages?
Fuck, I can't remember. It's about 230 pages, I think.
Okay.
At one point, the publisher was saying, we want 60,000 words. And I'm going, 60,000 words? I would like to finish this before I fucking die. And then I finally figured out how to do a word count on the computer. And to my amazement, at that point, I was over 60,000, which I didn't realize. Every time I thought about it, I thought, well, you've got a few stories, or you've got a few more. And then one day I just woke up to the fact of, hey, that's enough. Stop.
Was it difficult to, I mean, I'm sure some stories were obvious, but were there stories that you felt you had to leave on the cutting room floor? And you never know, even though, and I'm sorry you didn't enjoy this process, but you never know. Maybe with the reception that it gets from readers, maybe you'll be inspired to write another one down the road. You never know. Or the,
I'm not going to say never. I don't know what else I'd write unless it was volume two,
right.
and I don't know if I'd get through volume two. But
Well,
it was something I wanted to get off my back because people keep asking, and there were two people who encouraged me to the point where I went, they keep on at me. I need to think this through and find a way to do it. And one of them was Scott Rowley, who runs a whole bunch of magazines in Europe. And forgive me for saying it, but he finally got me when he said, I wish I could write like you write. And when I got that from him and what he does for a living, I went, I'm cornered. That's it. I've got to get to this now.
you have a gift. You have a way with words, and it's one thing in a podcast, but then just to put it on a page where you get to really fine tune the craft of language around these is very cool stories. I think that's going to make for a special book. So excited for that.
For, for me, for me, the important thing was the story, not the words that I know. It was like tell a story, and don't forget that I have a pretty big catalogue of compositions and songs. So having gone through the process of being a songwriter, which is edit, 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 and choice of word being even more significant when you're working in a composition because you don't have that many words that you can use, and then they have to have a certain rhythm. There has to be a sense of inherent melody in the word, uh, whether you're
Yeah.
choosing a certain vowel sound, whether you're choosing a certain consonant or not. I mean, all that I think helped me. So that when I actually started writing, it was like, think of it like an album.
Yeah.
Each
See,
section is a track and stands alone. And if you're thinking of it as an album and each section is a track, you'd better be able to drop the needle in at A and have it come out at Z.
I couldn't
It's got to have
agree
playthrough.
more. I
It's got
couldn't
to have
agree more.
playthrough.
I love that.
So,
And that's a compliment that I got when I was when I was showing friends the draft. So
yeah.
a friend of mine, a journalist, said, "This is a great demo tape. Now go finish the record." And it made me feel so good. So
Yes.
it's funny, a name you brought up before, Peter Paterno, that big time lawyer, he was connected to this marketing agency, which is why Doug only wanted to go there because of his relationship with Peter.
Oh,
And
he has a relationship with Peter Paterno still?
or he thinks he does. I don't know if he actually does, but he knows that there's history there. I guess. And that's why he only wanted to go to this one marketing place. I'm like, all right, this guy doesn't like me. Fuck him. Let's go somewhere else. And that's why he didn't go anywhere else until I guess it was too late and fizzled out. But it doesn't matter. It's in the past because you know why? We're getting an Alan Niven book. And this episode would not have happened if I wrote Doug's book. I think that's fair to say, right, Alan?
No, I don't think it is
No?
concrete.
Okay.
No, because
All right. Well, you're a good man. I don't know. I thought I felt bad. I felt I don't know, like you would
I,
have like held
I
it
did
against
not
me.
send you a little parcel of dynamite when you told me when you told me you were writing Doug's book.
No, you didn't.
I mean, the only thing I felt was, I like this guy. I hope this works out for him, and good luck. But with, what was the question again? If you'd written Doug's book, would I have ever
I
done?
thought that this
Yeah,
episode with us wouldn't happen, but but I mean,
yeah.
I'm looking in the way of.
My only negative with you, and I made it absolutely clear, was there's no fucking way that I'm going to appear on a screen with Douglas Goldstein. There is no equivalent.
I think I
I
just
will
asked
not.
once, and I was like, "That's it.
Yeah,
Sorry."
I will not give him that privilege.
Well, I
You done?
tried to not represent him per se, but just a perspective that if we ever get two autobiographies from Guns N' Roses managers, at least I
You're
don't
not
know.
getting a biography of a Guns N' Roses manager.
Oh,
You're
well,
getting a book. You're getting a book called
right,
Sound and
of
Fury,
stories.
and it's rock and roll stories. It's not about Guns N' Roses. It's not about me being a manager. It's just a book of rock and roll stories. And yeah, I'm sure you know where the title comes from.
Sound and Fury. I should know that.
It's Macbeth.
Beth. Ugh, I haven't taken Shakespeare in a
I'll
fortnight.
I'll send you the full quote.
I
And
think you did. You did. I didn't know why you were sending me Shakespeare.
yeah,
It goes to
but
show.
that that's where the title comes from. It's from Macbeth.
Well, I am a product of the American school system, so I blame that. Hopefully, I will have my son be a much better student than me. I promise you. I promise you that.
He'll be a better student just because of this. The computer, the computer,
That is very true, and I'll make
the
sure he
internet, the
watches.
computer. I absorb more information in 24 hours than I probably absorbed by the year when I was younger. I mean, my TV is on 24/7, which is a hangover from touring. You'd get into a hotel room and they all look the same and they smell the same and they feel the same. And the first thing I'd do was I'd turn on the TV because that would be my digital fireplace. And then I'd get out silk scarves and drape them over the lighting fixtures to try and get some different ambient light in the room. And then I'd light some incense and try and make it, but I cannot go to bed without the TV being on. It's on 24/7.
I I like that. It's on a lot. Even like when my family's not home and I'm doing work, I have the TV on. It's because I guess working in audio, I just need sounds. Sometimes you
And
need peace. Sometimes you need just the
and
sounds going
and,
off.
and there's a lot of really interesting information out there. Now, as a younger person, because I remember the event with incredible clarity, I always had a fascination with the Kennedy assassination. And
Oh, by the way, is that the
trying to
TV
find
on
it,
in the background right now? That's
trying, what?
that's the TV on in the background right now, by the way.
Yes, yeah. It's on 24/7. It never goes off.
Okay.
The cats sit and watch it.
I love it.
But trying to pick your way through propaganda and genuine information and figure out what actually happened there and why. And then the internet comes along, and then suddenly you're able to get to historical books, um, people's opinions, this, that, and the other. And you could formulate your comprehension of what happened there and who was involved and who did it and why it was done. And that was all because of the internet.
I think that's why I heard someone say that's why true crime is so popular now because of the internet and these all these unsolved mysteries of, before the internet, and now this is a whole new generation is like, wait a minute, I'm finding out all this new information and it's right at their fingertips. It's it's really incredible, and I know I'm not as old as you, but I do remember the pre-internet days and actually going to a
Nobody's as old
library.
as I am.
It's seasoned. You're a seasoned veteran. That's how I prefer to say it. And I got to get the another phrase right. Yes, it's not an autobiography. It is a book of stories. Forgive
Yeah.
me, Sound and Fury, uh, which I can't wait to read. And is there anything else that you're working on? I know you're always busy. Is there any like sometimes you work with bands? I mean, a book is a lot. You don't need anything
There are
else.
a couple of things. I mean, there were moments when I went, I feel so obliged, but I really have no enthusiasm to do this. I'm never going to get this fucking book out of my system. But much to my surprise, it is in process. And I went to my local bookstore and they went on the computer and they found it was already in their system and it's not out until June. So it actually got done.
Hey, for someone who just had just like his foot in like I don't know, a toe in the arena of trying to get a book done, I can see how hard it is,
Here's,
and I
here's,
just can.
here's the other thing. When you get your manuscript done, it's going to be a year before it comes out.
Sure, it takes
Oh,
time.
I mean, I thought we took a long time making records, making books, getting people to publish books and actually formulate the book. Oh my God.
I'll never forget Susan Duff's wife. She came out with a book. Not it's like loosely based on fact, but it's fiction. 9 years took her 9 years to finally get that. She had to keep submitting it and working on it and honing her craft. And I commend her for that, just to stick with it. Yeah, it's just a lot of work, and which is why, to go back, the fact that this is the 500th episode, I've just found it so much easier. I'm a journalism major, but just being able to talk on the microphone and another technology that came across. I did not think podcasts would be anything. I thought it was a stupid idea. It's for people who can't make it in radio. I'm obviously very wrong. I mean, there are people who can turn on a microphone and they sound like it. And there are those, professionals, celebrities have all their podcasts. It's a legit thing. So the fact that I've been
Yeah.
able to do 500 is insane to me, and it's become such a part of my life where, Alan, I'm not sure if I told you this. It really stemmed from finding something to get out of my depression. My
Okay.
my my therapist like said find like a hobby. Like I'm working in radio, but I wasn't being creatively satisfied. She's like, you got to find, and I thought that sounded so stupid. Like, what do I like to do? And, I love horror movies. Like, but what can I really do with that? And just one day, my friend Ian said, we should, also works in radio. We should do a Guns N' Roses podcast. And I thought it was so silly, but he knew more than I did that knew successful podcasters and saw this road ahead. And the fact that I can get interviews, including ones with yours, that get picked up by news outlets, that I get to talk to some of you, phone, email. It's just a very special thing to have happened and to connect with listeners. I said it earlier, all across the globe who do not speak English for a first language, who follow me, whether it's on social media or listen to the podcast. It's humbling. I'm always getting new messages about
The,
saying, hey,
the,
it's just humbling.
the other aspect of the podcast, and this again is congratulations, this is 500, is the fact that you kept doing it because obviously people have said to me, you should do a podcast. And I'm sitting there going, that sounds like a treadmill I don't want to get on. That means I've got to do it diligently every week, have a schedule that's around this. I don't know if I'm up for that. So for you to do it, I mean, there's an awful lot of diligence, and work to get to 500. Well done.
Thank you. I just, for whatever, I just loved it. I think I became loving it. Yes, scheduling things is very difficult. And probably not to your shock, within the Guns N' Roses world, you could be given a lot of pushback.
Ah,
People who don't like the clickbait that comes out of your articles, even
yeah.
though I'm like, it's not my fault. And just, it's, I've had ups and downs, but way more ups than downs. I mean, when it's such a great online fan community, but there are those section of fans who are just nutcases and just, cyberbullying things happen, but that's way in the past.
Oh, what is the rule? The rule is don't scroll down.
That's
Right?
uh that's a
It,
problem of
it,
mine.
yeah, no, what you have to do is do it, publish it, and never, ever read the comments.
I can't though. It's not the comments that I get, because I've been able to curate some great people. I think it was at the beginning of people who did not, who were already in the. It sounds so nerdy and weird. People who are already in the community who think that they know everything. And if I come on here and I tell a story that I may have heard, or I have a guest that tells their version of a story, and they think it's a lie, and they are so defensive of Axel and the band. So people who don't know them, but are just so blindly loyal
Oh,
that just
and apart from that, weren't
it's strange.
weren't there.
Weren't there, weren't there, and that's something I've said since the beginning. I'm not there. I'm not an expert. I'm just fortunate to have been told a lot of stories, or maybe I've educated stories that hopefully are true. But I don't. I've never been there. Unless I've been there. I don't
Apart
know.
from that, apart from that, you enjoy cinema, don't you?
Yeah, well, horror particularly, but yes.
Have you ever seen a Japanese film called Rashomon?
I have seen a Serbian film, but so no, no. For
If
those
I'm
who
remember,
get it.
if I'm remembering the film correctly, it's a film about something like 6 or 7 people all recounting the same event.
Hmm,
It's it's an entertaining film from that point of view.
I can see where you're going with it, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So, even those who are there may have a different perspective or a different understanding or not really know what really happened, even though they were there.
I completely agree. It's always amazing how these rock stars remember everything for times that they were drunk and high the entire time, but they remember everything. It's
Yeah.
just it's quite amazing. But well, within these 500, you have a collection of stories, audible stories. I mean, maybe one day I'll transcribe them, and people do that, transcribe, like Howard Stern. We mentioned that before. I know I'm not a huge fan either. I think he's a bit, I mean, I know he paved his way. He's big in radio, and I respect him for certain things, but I definitely think he's overrated. I know I have a problem cutting people off because I just get excitable. He cuts people off to basically like tell the story for them. And I'm just like, why are you even interviewing this person when you're telling them the story? That's their story, and you just want them to go yeah or not. It's just silly. But maybe one day, I don't know, put out a book of stories from this podcast. We'll see. But either way, I mean, 500 episodes. Who knows what is next? Alan, I just thank you so much. I mean, this is
Well, no,
was
thank you.
not. I don't do
So
2 hour episodes anymore. You're special.
it's so far in the rear view mirror. And occasionally, if I scroll down, he sounds bitter. No, I'm not bitter, but I definitely do have a point of view about some things that happened, and I have a point of view about some certain personalities involved. And the other thing is, it was a period of my life. It wasn't my whole life. I have been involved with lots of other things and lots of other people. Just this particular thing became something huge. And that to me was a gift and a privilege because, and it's a privilege because I didn't have to spend my life going, I wonder what it would be like if.
Mm.
with the things that you care about and are interested in. And obviously, I have a love of music, and I love creating music, and I love making records, and I love writing songs, and I enjoy all that. Um, I've been privileged with a very rare level of experience, and I am not bitter about that.
No, you can tell. I mean, I knew from our first conversation the sincerity that you have and the appreciation that you have for the people who paved the way for you, the people that you worked
Yeah,
with, just for the experience itself, knowing how rare it was, and
yeah.
justifiably taking. And this is something that you and Doug will agree on, is that you said, "Sweet child of mine, give me money for a video," and that really saved that band when they were ready to drop them. Right, like when Welcome wasn't hitting yet, you saved that band. So there are so many things in history that
Well,
Alan Niven did.
the whole thing about Sweet Child is read read it in the book because that story is in the book.
Awesome.
But
I love that.
but
Okay.
but it's there's comedy in it. The way the whole thing transpired and the various people involved and their various motives and their various actions. Um, the extraordinary thing about Sweet Child is we were given half the budget that we got for Jungle, and I had to do Jungle back to back with a Great White video so as I could get the storyboard done. And then they gave us half. We didn't have enough to do Jungle, and then they gave us half. And out of half the budget for a low end video, we ended up with two. But read about it in the book.
I will. I will. Alan
All right,
Niven, thank
listen.
you so
Always,
much.
always a
You
pleasure.
got it.
You're looking great. You're looking healthy.
Alan, again, thank you so much. So that does it for episode 500 of Appetite for Distortion. When will we see the next one? In the words of Axel Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.